Well, first of all, we're not taught as children that it's okay, for example, to express your feelings. That's the first step. You're sensitive to other people's energies, for example, which is very, very common, in children. Or, in some cases where you can sense energy and, the presence of energies and things like that, it is not acceptable. So what they call this is parapsychology. Para means pseudoscience or something like that, unfortunately. But what I've done is work with scientists to actually bring data, to bring validation to the fact that our consciousness, our mind, is the one that is affecting our physiology, is the one that is creating our reality.
If we've been told this is true and we found out it's not, if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? Or what else is maybe knowing that's not true? Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So you've been studying, documenting this stuff for a long time. I've came across your work quite some time ago through Superhuman on Gaia. And my big question is the stuff that you've researched, studied, filmed, documented is so true for you and for a lot of people. But why is there why is it not more widely accepted, talked about, or known by 99% of people don't know what superhuman is or this stuff? Why not?
Well, first of all, we're not taught as children that it's okay, for example, to express your feelings. That's the first step, Also, if you're sensitive to other people's energies, for example, which is very, very common, in children, or, in some cases where you can sense energy and, the presence of energies and things like that, it is not acceptable. So you don't talk about it. So we grow up in this society where this becomes a taboo. Like, what? You're weird. What do you mean you can sense energy that's not visible to us? So because of that, I think we live in a society that's so fear-based when you're introducing concepts that are not easily explained by modern science. And of course, the scientists are, as soon as you say the C word, consciousness, they're like, no, it doesn't exist. But we are conscious beings. How could it not exist? But for them, you can't measure it, therefore it doesn't exist. So we don't have that sort of validation, scientific validation, in terms of for the mainstream. That's the reason why.
There is science studying a lot of stuff, and there's things that are happening that you've seen as into documenting this stuff that is verified. You're seeing it, you're witnessing it under studies. So is that not earth shattering for people? And why isn't mainstream news and everyone just waking up and being yo, so there's something else out there?
Yeah, exactly. So what they call this is parapsychology. Para means pseudoscience or something like that, unfortunately. But what I've done is work with scientists to actually bring data, to bring validation to the fact that our consciousness, our mind, is the one that is affecting our physiology, is the one that is creating our reality. We hear a lot about this concept, if you're stressed or if you think negative thoughts or whatever, you can get sick. But what I wanted to know is how? Show me how. And so that's why the movie Superhuman has been so successful, because we were able to do actual scientific experiments on camera, live, where we demonstrate that it's your mind that is actually affecting a physical object, or water, for example, or your physical body. Things are changing when you think about them in a certain way. So it's starting to happen. I think it's time.
Yeah. So in Superhuman, there's exhibits of literally changing the pH of water, right in front of people just through thought, right? And then also people seeing through blindfolds. This stuff is crazy to me. And if you told me this stuff 2 years ago, I would have thought you were some loony, right? So I think I'm noticing, or maybe it's just me because I'm starting to tune into it, more people having conversations around it. Or do you think that there's like, since you've been doing this for quite some time, like, is there a broader awareness coming to see this stuff?
I definitely think there's a broader awareness because, like, I remember a long time ago when I started out talking about meditation. I came up with specific types of meditation at the time. When I was, talking about yoga, I'm talking, even in the 80s or 90s, people would be rolling their eyes like, oh my God, like, what is she,
Like as
it's
if it
like,
was like
why she
taboo?
really, yeah, like, oh, like she's this woo woo person, you know what I mean? And, or eat organic foods or whatever. So definitely since then, I feel people have accepted more the idea that your mind does affect your physiology. I mean, even now, for example, mindfulness or meditation is used by medical doctors, or it's more mainstream. But I think there's something else going on. I think more recently there's been so much fake stuff that has come to the surface. Like, for example, things that we're told, like this medication works, or there's a pandemic on this, or, like the
Squirt this into your
vaccine.
body and it
Yeah,
helps. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like all kinds of things that turned out to be false, from, healthcare to politics to everything else in between. And people are starting to wake up and go like, what? No, no.
Mm.
You told us this, but now it's that. So because of that, I think there's an overall feel of wanting to know the truth for yourself. And because of that, now it's okay to start talking about these concept of you have the power to do this. You have the power to tune into the truth yourself
Mm.
and heal yourself, for example,
Yeah. So it's like, if this is, we've been told this is true and we found out it's not. If they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? Or what else is maybe known that's not true?
Exactly, exactly. So I think in a weird way, all of these lies, that we're being told on the news or politics, everything else, has helped the average person wake up and say, like you just said, if they lied about this, this, and that, well, what else? So I need to rely on myself. Every man for himself at this point, I think,
Mm.
where I want to find out for myself if this product is good for me, if this product is actually going to work or what have you. And so because of that, it's okay now to start talking about, well, how do you tap into this power? So because of this, I think we're at this juncture. It's very, very exciting where we're no longer taboo and woo-woo and everything else. It's more like, okay, a lot of people who are on the fence are now saying, okay, I'm willing to accept that there's truth to it, but show me how. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So whereas before it would be like,
Right. Right. They just write it off. Whereas now
right.
people are open to seeing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Do you think that there's something like pushing that, where people, like these lies, for example, in the news? Is it just that happened to happen by accident, or is there something maybe greater that's like orchestrating this thing happening?
Well, I am a believer that there is a higher divine order. That's my take on it because of my personal experience since I was a child, of seeing certain things, how they work behind the scenes. And so I think we have been living in a sort of a matrix where it's all basically programming. We're supposed to think that way. We're supposed to grow up and have a job, make money, buy a house, a dog, and that's your life purpose. And so just to keep you in a box, if you get sick, you take this pill. If all of this programming is now breaking free. And your question is very interesting. Is it just that those in power, so to speak, all of a sudden are becoming so enlightened and wanting to free us, or is there something else? So I feel that at this juncture in humanity's evolution, there's a higher order and higher intelligence that's working through the people coming into power, or even, like behind the scenes for the average person wanting to wake up. And so that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I understand that your first like ESP experience was when you were 5, and you had a group of something come and communicate telepathically through you. Is that true?
Yes. You want me to tell you that story?
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember very clearly. I was 5 years old, and I remember because it was Christmas Eve. And so I was just like there looking around the living room, and there was like my parents and other adults like fussing around the gifts and the Christmas tree and everything else. And I kept thinking, like looking at them and thinking, these adults, these humans, like they don't love each other, because they were bickering about, the gifts and the food and, and I'm thinking like, it's so strange, but isn't today supposed to be a day about love? I didn't know anything, but I mean, as a 5-year-old. So exactly at that moment, I sensed this sort of presence. I'm not really sure how else to describe it, but some sort of something. And it just felt like light. I felt like I was inside light. And that felt amazing. It was such a huge contrast with, the people around me. And so I was like, oh, that feels like love. You know what I mean? And so because of that, I kind of paid attention. I was like, what is that? And I just sensed like it was beings kind of talking to me. And that's how it all happened. They basically were transferring information, and I could hear it and sense it. And that was very significant at 5 years old.
Mhm. And how did that affect what you then did in your life?
So, when I was 5 years old, like, you don't know any better. Like, people say, well, did you tell your parents? I didn't tell my parents because I thought like, oh, all the children have that experience or something like that. I didn't think it was anything special. I didn't think I was special. It was later that I kept having those experiences, like where I would like meet someone for the first time, and then I would like feel like what they're going through and things like that. I was like an empath. And later I realized, well, no, not everybody's necessarily doing that. So that's how I started to look into, what did I do? Like, how did that work? And that's how it got me on the journey of consciousness,
Okay.
the study of consciousness.
And for Superhuman, for example, what were the pieces that came together where that started to come to fruition and you decided to make that film?
Yeah, so I guess I can continue the story. So when I was like in college, I kept having on and off experiences like that where I would sense things before they happen. And so I thought I was weird. I thought like something's wrong with me, like why am I doing this? And maybe something's like my brain's not working right, So I went to college and I studied psychology, to make sure
That nothing is wrong.
Yeah, I didn't have like a loose screw or something. And of course I didn't. By the time I got to graduate school, I mean, I realized it was just all consciousness and, traditional psychotherapy. It didn't it was just about certain, how the brain functions or whatever, or certain patterns that have to do with your childhood. But that's it. I was going way beyond that. Like, how is it possible that I would know of someone's problem or something like without them telling me? Like, how does that work? So I didn't know how I did it, but I knew I did it and I was right over and over. So I realized that I was actually talking about consciousness, that there's a part of us that is way bigger than this physical body. And this part of us that's bigger than a physical body, it's still there. It's basically still on the other side, tapping into everything, like the entire universe. You came from that aspect of your being. And just a part of your consciousness is showing up in this body. But you don't cease to exist on the other side. So that was the trick, is to figure out how you can cross back and forth between who you are as a pure consciousness and who you are in this body with mastery, without freaking out. A lot of people open up to these incredible experiences, but they lose it. Like, they don't know how to master it. And I think I had these experiences since I was a child for me to figure out, okay, how does it work? How can I do it on purpose? Because that's the ultimate way of evolving as a human, to understand who you are as a consciousness, what you're here to do, and how to manage both.
So you started practicing that ability?
Yeah. So what happened is I didn't have like a guru or something like that. I wanted to understand how it spontaneously happened to me. And so I would sit for hours and hours and hours. I would put myself through very rigorous exercises and meditation for hours. And I'd be like, okay, so what does it feel like when I'm doing it this way, when I'm just quieting, when I'm focusing on the heart, when I'm focusing here, when I'm focusing on the planet, So I would kind of like test myself and sense what experiences I was having and taking notes. It was that kind of stuff. But eventually I got it. Eventually I realized that there are specific frequencies that you get to that allow you to just open up spontaneously. And so after, months and months and years of practice, so I came up with those types of methodologies, and I taught others as well.
So is it something that people have to take a long period of time to practice, or do you have shortcuts?
Yeah, exactly. So it took me a long time, because what I think like a scientist. I'm not a scientist, but I think like one, or like an engineer, I guess. I like to know the mechanics of things. Like, don't tell me that my mind, if I focus my mind on the water, I can change the pH. I want to know how, like what is happening in my brain that allows this to happen. So that's why I would like dissect every little thing that was happening in my body, in my heart, in my brain, And so it took me a long time to figure it out. When I teach, it's very methodical, but eventually I came up with techniques that people can just like do. One of the meditation is connecting to source. It's free on my website, by the way. And it contains that frequency that allows you to just like boom, 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 open. And it's in 7 minutes. So of course, for the people, they don't have to think like, oh my God, I have to study for 20 years before I get there. That's not true. I did that so that you don't. So that's how I got to this point. But you asked me about superhuman, right?
Well, with this, you kind of just, like you said, boom, boom, boom. Is there something that's like, that you kind of drew like your hand? Is there something that's happening? Like, are you visualizing some kind of connection inside your body, or what are you actually doing?
Yeah. So what happened is that I went back to the first experience when I was 5, where I was just minding my own business, and all of a sudden I was seeing basically subtle energy, meaning beyond your human spectrum, what you can see. And I realized that my brain kind of transferred from, it's like there are like 0 points, vortex points basically inside your brain, basically throughout your body. Every cell has a 0 point, which is the nucleus basically. And that's empty space. And if you are able to tap into that empty space, you're basically outside time and space, and you can do and go anywhere you want. So the idea is to go into the 0 point inside your brain. There's a specific there's a specific point at the center of your brain that allows you to transfer from linear thinking, from 10% capacity, whatever, into full brain. It's like a multidimensional awareness.
Is that the Cave of Brahma, or is this something else?
I don't know how others teach. I just know how I discovered this. So the idea is to align certain 0 points in your brain, behind your heart, and behind your navel. And what happens as soon as you go there, it's like your brain channels, like, it's hard to describe because it's an experience, you know. It's like you have channels, like your brain is plugged into certain frequencies in the universe. And if you do it this way, you plug directly into a frequency that I call source. That's kind of the hub from where everything emerges. Everything comes out of source. You come from source, the planets come out from source, the sun, everything emerges from that one source. And so when you are in this specific vibration, and your body, your cellular body, is now vibrating between 734 hertz to 1,000 hertz. So it's like everything, like, that's why I said boom, boom, boom. You know, like, go into the 0 point, your cellular vibration is higher, your mind channels, your brain channels align specifically with that one frequency source. And as soon as you're there, everything opens up. It's like you become all that is. And so if you want to know who you were before coming in this body, if you want to know what you're here to do, if you want to hear something, it's all there. The idea is to maintain both. That's the hard part.
Yeah, when I tap into that kind of stuff, I'm like, especially I've done some crazy retreats. I've done, days and up to a week of not eating and testing all these methodologies to try to access something. And I get to a place, I'm like, wow, I want to stay here. And I think that's almost like the problem. And I think that's why some people who are spiritual get disconnected or seem out of connection with an ordinary person, is because there's they went there and they kind of just stayed there, and they weren't balancing the physical world with this energy and bringing it together.
Absolutely. And I know even in my work, as I'm facilitating for other people, once we're there, I mean, the contrast is so huge with what's happening here on this planet in terms of vibration and frequencies. There, it's like, it's just, I mean, I'm trying to describe, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just pure energy. It's like you need nothing. You just are, it's even beyond unconditional love, because it's almost, there's just no need for anything. It's absolutely exquisite. Whereas here, you're constantly being pulled, this energy and that energy it's this constant contrast here. And so I totally relate to that once you're up there, you don't want to come back. But the idea is to bring that here. That's the work. Because like what you were saying, once you reach that or you experience that, it's almost like you have to come to terms with your physicality, your finite self. You're like, how could I be that and be so pathetic? I have fears, I have confusion, I don't know where I'm going, I get sick, it's a huge contrast. And so that's the point. The idea is to embrace that, experience that, and bring that into your physicality and to master both. That's the idea.
Going through that, imagine for a lot of people, there's a lot of resistance to that, because we face it, and especially I've seen people who have grown up with really rigid belief systems, either religious or anti-religious. I'm lucky I grew up in a kind of a house where I was discover for yourself what you believe is right. And so I've noticed that people who've grown up with very rigid or have developed and calcified in their body and their brain certain belief systems have even harder chance or ability to even consider that. to the point where when I've seen people go through these like awakenings where they'll have an experience and like they'll be distraught for weeks, but it's like a positive thing. It's like, you just discovered what you truly are. Why are you so upset? It's like, well, I'm trying to process this information. Like,
Yeah.
and I've seen this happen.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is that, have you seen that? And like, how do people manage and control these like awakening experiences?
Yeah, it's very hard. Actually, sometimes I see people who have experiences when they were children, because I do something similar to a regression, when I work with people. And a lot of children have those experiences. They open up just like I did. And instead of it being something positive, it blocks them. It creates a trauma in their mind, because they were like, how could I be that and be in this body? And so they kind of block themselves from opening up more and wanting to understand. So there's that going on. And exactly what you're saying is, it's like the belief systems, the religious upbringing, all of that. It's very, very difficult for a lot of people. And sometimes most of the time, you're like the only one in your family who believes this, and then everybody else is telling you, stop that, you're crazy, So the processing is much harder, because deep inside you, that is truth. But then in your 3D life, you have, your family around you that's, not wanting to be open, at least, to the conversation. So it is very difficult. But at the end of the day, you have to think of, why are you here? Are you here to live your life for others or for yourself? You have to make a choice,
I used to, as a kid, I would lay in bed at night, and I never really talk about this publicly, but I had these like where I would start seeing like geometric shapes, and I would feel it like literally in my body, like my fingers I would be feeling this stuff, and I explained it to my mom, and it got to the point where I would continue having these experiences, and they started taking me to get like CT scans and all this like medical stuff, and then like I was like laying in my bed because I was just like thinking at night, and I would like twirl my hair, and then because of that, my hair started to fall out because I was just like spinning my hair. So they thought I was like deathly ill. I'm seeing these visions. Now my hair is on my bed, all over my bed. And it's so interesting because I went through probably a couple of years of treatment trying to figure out like what's wrong with this kid. Well, it's like he's actually tapping into something that like we're suppressing in our society.
Exactly. How old were you?
Like 8 to 12.
Yeah, yeah. It usually starts around the age of 5, 6, and then children who are sensitive will continue to have it, and I can just tell, just sitting here with you, I could just tell. So you're still open to these kinds of energies, and like you were saying, parents aren't going to accept that. They think there's something wrong with you, and they go the medical route. Because we don't understand consciousness. We don't understand how energy works. And so I'm hoping that through the work that I'm doing, not just the teaching, but the films, because films are, accessible. They're relatable, Not everybody's going to read books and sit, through workshops and things like that. Although I do want people to go to my workshops. But, it's easier to reach people who are on the fence, for example, through a movie. It's almost like entertainment. Okay, let me see what these people have to say, and then hopefully they'd be convinced. But I hate to say it, but you're kind of a typical story where you are sensitive, you're an empath, and you're opening up to all these energies, and your parents are blocking your abilities. But I think you still have them, don't you?
Yeah, sure. I think what's interesting, my mom put on when I was 14, she came back with this DVD, and she said to me and my sister, she said, "Hey guys, I have something I want to show you. Let's watch this movie together." And it was Law of Attraction when it came out on DVD. And so we're sitting like in our basement watching this, and I'm like, I'm
Wait,
seeing
Law of Attraction or The Secret?
The Secret. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. The Secret. Yeah. And I'm seeing like, I think it was like Bob Proctor at the time and Rhonda Burns and all these people that were in it. And I'm like, this is interesting because now like I'm kind of getting little boxes to understand these thoughts that have been floating in my mind, but I never really had like a way to conceptualize them.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of started it. And then I was just like very interested in like success philosophies and principles. So I was reading personal development books as a kid, started seeing that successful people meditate.
Right.
So, you know, when I'm like 16 or 17, I'm meditating and I'm starting to have these things happening. I'm like, oh wow, like this is weird. To the point where eventually I shut it because I got scared. I went to a place that you were talking about earlier where it was like, oh, I kind of went too far. Like I'm not ready for this yet. And I pulled back from that. But I think that like it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on how we can, the work you're doing, but like also just like allow like kids and humans to like feel that and be okay feeling that, but do it in like a way that's safe.
What do you mean by safe?
I think that like, I mean, I've heard stories of people like, like that just like go and don't come back.
Right. Well, what happens is that, like, for example, astral projection, people teach that where you actually leave your body. So you have to be aware of these things because you can actually leave your body. And to me, that's not very safe, speaking of safety. So in the methodologies that I teach, for example, that was one of the first things that I did was question myself. Like, how do I know I'm not making this up? That was the first thing. The second thing is, how do I know, of course, I'm not crazy, you know, we got that part. How do I know that I am not projecting? Like if I'm working with someone, like maybe I'm projecting my own stuff. How do I know I'm outside my body, or is it me, or is it somebody else speaking through me? You know, there's all these questions, but I'm so glad I did ask these questions because like, am I channeling somebody else? Like how does this all work, you know? So I was very lucky to be able to see the energy. Like I can see the subtle energy. Like I can see beyond your body, for example. Makes sense? So for example, I would be working with someone and I would see an entity there. I mean, sometimes it was very beautiful energy, but sometimes it wasn't, you know? So because of that training, I realized that if you're outside your body, it's not a good thing. And so you have to create a protocol to know how to raise your vibration, what type of meditation is going to do what to say, what not to say, and how to keep your energy field sealed, especially before you go to sleep.
Interesting. Just in general?
In general, because usually before you go to at night, usually you leave your body. Most of the time, you're just right outside your body, like to give your body a break, to give yourself a break from the physical expression. But this is where I see people meeting their spirit guides or, you know, ancestors or whatever, just being in the larger aspect of themselves. But sometimes I see them like taking off and going to like Sirius B or the Pleiades, and then the body is just there, and I see other entities coming in. So this is very real. I didn't want to believe it. I was like, nah, come on, really? And then it would happen over and over. And then when we release that energy from the body, the person is back to themselves. So that's how we know that what we are seeing is correct when you have that result, you know? So you're absolutely right that it has to be safe. There's a protocol.
Now, for some people I've heard of, like, they'll start to see subtle energies. Maybe it will be like, some people I've heard of people seeing like they'll go outside and they'll see like kind of like in the sky, like it'll look a little bit more energetic. And then they might be like sitting here and they'll see something that seems like it runs up the wall, right? That's probably someone starting to tap into that, right?
Well, I don't know how different people teach that, but what happens is that like when I'm teaching people to see beyond the physical spectrum, basically what your eyes are supposed to see. It comes in different. It feels like, or it looks like, but it also feels like, because all your senses are kind of together. It's a different way of perceiving. It's not linear anymore, as I was saying earlier. It's like you tap into that energy and you see it, you sense it, you hear it, you smell it. It's like a whole experience of that energy. It's almost like information that you're reading. And so the way it actually looks, it's kind of like a holographic, faint holographic aspect of something. Some people see colors. Some people see geometric shapes. Some people hear, although hearing is very difficult because think about it. If you hear but you don't see, it could mess up. It could mess you up. You're like, what? There's somebody there. Actually, that's like schizophrenia. All mental illness is energetic, basically. I mean, I worked with so many kids or adults actually that had schizophrenic, episodes. And every time they think they could hear something or see something, well, that's because there was an entity there. I mean, they could literally see them and hear them. So it was real. But then they would go to the psychiatrist and say, no, that's not real. Take a drug to numb your brain. So now you're in conflict because deep inside you, you really, really saw something and you really heard something because you're sensitive. But then the doctors will tell you, no, that's because you're crazy and you're not supposed to. So it's very confusing, you see. So I don't know what the question was. When they start to see something.
What should we do in that instance, right?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, so for example, I was very lucky, or some individuals were lucky, because they came to me when they would have schizophrenic episodes, but then they were open enough to try something else other than drugs. And then when we would speak to the entity, the energy, and tell it to just go away, then the person would stop having these experiences. But go explain that to a psychiatrist who's trained, in medical school, and tell them, yeah, the reason why this client is seeing things and seeing people and hearing things is because these entities are there. I mean, it's very difficult. So the only thing you can do is just keep talking about these things, and hopefully, just keep, sharing your experience, and those who are open and ready to listen will,
Is there anything you've seen that you're like, I don't know if that's real or not?
Sometimes in the case of like what people call UFOs.
Okay, interesting.
Okay. I would see something that people think is a UFO, like some sort of light that's morphing, doing this or that. But then when I would look at it, I would see that it's a reflection. It's like a reflection of something else that seems to appear here, but it's actually somewhere else. So it's very difficult to describe, but it's not real in the sense that it's an actual object or an actual light which is showing up there where you think you're seeing it. So there's a lot of that.
Have you seen the stories about the drones that have been flying around?
Yeah.
Any perception on what that could be?
Well, okay, that's, again, my personal experience or my intuition and my sense of what's happening. I actually think these are, like kind of a data collection. I think, to me, this feels Chinese made. So whether they're tapping into through like information gathering, kind of data gathering. And recently I saw, I think it was like a congressional hearing or something, and there were a few politicians saying, yes, have them appear above military bases in Virginia, and the other one was saying Oklahoma, and the other one was saying Utah. So it's actually a lot more than what we've seen recently. So I think the military knows what this is, because if they were like a foreign threat or something, they would have shut them down. So there's some sort of psyop operation going on. There's something going on that, you know what I mean? Because they could have shut them down.
Sure, yeah. If it was a threat, but then the question is, well, if they're Chinese data collections, why haven't they shot them down?
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is, some of them, I think they know what's going on, because, we have the wrong impression. We think that everybody in the government knows everything. That's kind of what we think should be. If somebody tells us the truth or makes a statement, we think that that's the truth for everyone. But there are sections in the government. There's like different departments. I mean, two people sitting next to each other, and in the Department of Defense, for example, one guy may know everything that's going on, and the guy next to him has no clue. So when the guy who has no clue goes out and does a press conference and says, we don't know what these, drones are doing, or we don't, because he truly believes that we don't have that information. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's why it's very difficult to judge from what we're being told. I think that there is a part of the government or the military or both that know exactly what's going on and are allowing it for some reason, and others that don't. And also the confusion helps with the whole fear-based, fear-mongering, for control.
I've heard some people this year that are like, I'd say like in the spiritual content creators or influencers, talking about this being some big transformative year. Have you heard that, or is that just like some people kind of saying something just for the sake of saying it?
I think this is a huge year. That is a turning point on humanity's evolution. I totally think so. Because if you notice, since last year, everything is like up in our face. All of a sudden, the whole Hollywood is collapsing, in my opinion anyway. You're going to see that. I've been
physically, energetically.
Exactly. I mean, I've been talking about this for a couple of years at least. I said some big truth is going to come out, and we're going to see a lot of, one person, one after the other, go down in Hollywood. And to me, it's very exciting, because Hollywood is very connected to politicians, three-letter agencies. It's not just Hollywood. And so the fact that all of these things just came up to the surface, it's in our face. There's just too much evidence at this point. You can't go back. At this point, you can't say, oh no, there's no evidence that there's child trafficking. Yes, there's plenty of evidence. So that's what makes this year very different. Up until last year, we could say, well, it's speculation. I don't know. No, there's, I mean, you'll see this is going to start coming out even more and more in the next couple of months, actually, I think. So that's the reason why I think this is very transformative. It's not just about Hollywood. It's about literally breaking down our reality. What we thought was, oh, this person was, looking up for, as your icon for this or that, was all a facade, hiding behind some big operation, for personal gain, personal control, dark stuff happening. And like I said, because it's interconnected with politics and other agencies, it's like our entire system is collapsing. That's what I truly believe. That's why it's transformative for the individual, because we are going to witness all of these structures literally collapsing and new systems coming into place.
If I was the higher order, or had some say in this higher order that you mentioned earlier, and I was trying to create some kind of awakening or like some kind of collective awareness happening, there'd be like two ways to do it. One, you can do it like quick and dirty, and there's going to be a lot of trauma from that, a lot of pain, a lot of people going through like, what the heck? Or gradually over a period of decades or even centuries. What you're describing sounds like quick and dirty, like it's just going to happen. The Band-Aid's getting ripped off this year. Do you feel that, or has it been gradual and this is just like the turning point?
It has been gradual. We've been talking about this, for years and years and years. I remember I worked with, do you know Paul Hutchinson? Okay, so I met Paul a couple of years ago, I think, and he basically was, it's a long story, but he did about 70 undercover missions rescuing trafficked children. And when I first met him, I was like, okay, but then I saw the actual pictures, tapes, the way they're negotiating, because he was undercover. And so, because now he's talking about it and he's coming out with a book, everything else. So I was working with him actually on a TV show. And so when I saw this with my own eyes, I was like, oh my God, how is it possible? How is it possible that we're actually trafficking small children? And the stories are horrific. And this has been going on for years and years and years. So a couple of years ago, I started talking about it, and I was shocked because, well, most people were like, oh, it's horrific. But some people were like, oh, no, it's propaganda. And I was like, no, I saw it with my own eyes. But the point being that that people at that time, only 2 years ago, still wanted to believe that it wasn't true. And now there's so much evidence coming out right and left, and there's going to be a lot more, that there's no turning back. You cannot unsee what you saw. Too many people are going to see the evidence, tapes, pictures, all kinds of stuff that we've been talking about for years and years and years. And I've only started talking about it 2 years ago, just this one subject. So it's not a fast Band-Aid thing. It's just the turning point of something we've been talking about. The financial system, the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it's been going on for years and years. And just now, these pharmaceutical, corporate people are starting to talk about or be brought to justice. You know what I mean? So I think it's a long time coming,
Yeah. It's interesting because during, like, right before the last election, not this one, the 2020 election, there was like conspiracy theories and a lot of stuff where this stuff was coming to light.
Yeah.
And it was like, kind of like after that election, it was kind of like, all this stuff's going to come out like now. And then it didn't. And I was like, because I was looking into it and I was super interested.
When?
Like 2020, like right after Biden beat Trump in 2020.
Right.
And there was this like belief that all this trafficking and all the Hollywood stuff was going to come to light.
Yeah.
But it never did. And so for me, I was like, I took a step back and was like, oh, like maybe this is like maybe there's some truth to this. Like you see this guy named Podesta in front of this pizza restaurant. And then there's like stories of kids and all these things. Like maybe there's some truth to it, or maybe it's all not true. But what I'm hearing from you is like, there's a lot of truth and it's going to start coming to light.
Yeah, well, I personally saw it like with my own eyes. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe some of the videos, because these guys going undercover, like they have cameras, like, and they're pinned. And I mean, it's just like kind of James Bond kind of thing. But they work with the federal police wherever they go in, usually in South America. And, they're prepared. It's all undercover. So they're recording, so these are all cameras. And because I was making the film with Paul and, other folks, I had to see. I was like, I'm not going to just go talk about it without seeing the actual thing. So it's horrific. Like the guy is showing, Paul like a 7-year-old or 11-year-old, like, she's a virgin, so she's 500. And if you want a couple of those, I can give you a little discount. I mean, like crazy stuff talking about little girls and boys, by the way. And what shocked me is a lot of these traffickers were women. I couldn't believe it. I was like, my heart just like dropped. I'm not saying they work on their own. They're part of an entire organization. And they use these women because it's easier, for a woman to talk to a child and stuff. But it's horrific stuff that I saw with my own eyes. So I can't unsee that. This is the truth,
There was a movie came out, I think last year.
Yeah, Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom, yeah. With Tim Ballard. And when I saw that, I was sitting in the theater with my buddy, and I'm like, I've never cried in that theater before. And to just see that this is the reality that people are facing, and I'm over here and like complaining about whatever my problems are. And then like to consider that at a deeper level, why is this happening? And my interpretation is there's some energetic stuff there with kids and innocence or something that's just like so dark and evil. Yeah. That's, I don't know, controlling people for a woman to do that. Like something had to come to her, and like you have to be seriously messed up to be in that world.
Exactly. So Sound of Freedom, because Paul was the first executive producer who worked on the film. He used to work with Tim, and then they had a fallout and this whole thing. But anyway, so he was in on the whole thing. And in fact, he is the character, if you remember, of the millionaire American who goes down to the island, who was going to fund the sex hotel, if you remember the story. So that was Paul. That was his first undercover mission. And when he saw that with his own eyes, because he was very, very successful businessman, and so he was asked to help financially support, and then they called him to actually come and play that role, and that's how he got into the whole thing. So long story short, he was very much involved in the movie, what is it? Oh, Sound of Freedom.
Is he involved with Operation Underground Railroad?
He was.
Okay.
And then he split up and he did his own operation. He started going off on his own operations with other operators. So I think that he did like 30 with Operation Underground, and then he did to figure out how you can cross back and forth between who you are as a pure consciousness and who you are in this body with mastery, without freaking out. A lot of people open up to these incredible experiences, but they lose it. Like they don't know how to master it. And I think I had these experiences since I was a child for me to figure out, okay, how does it work? How can I do it on purpose? Because that's the ultimate way of evolving as a human, to understand who you are as a consciousness, what you're here to do, and how to manage both.
So you started practicing that ability?
Yeah. So what happened is I didn't have like a guru or something like that. I wanted to understand how it spontaneously happened to me. And so I would sit for hours and hours and hours. I would put myself through very rigorous exercises and meditation for hours. And I'd be like, okay, so what does it feel like when I'm doing it this way, when I'm just quieting, when I'm focusing on the heart, when I'm focusing here, when I'm focusing on the planet, So I would kind of like test myself and sense what experiences I was having and taking notes. It was that kind of stuff. But eventually I got it. Eventually I realized that there are specific frequencies that you get to that allow you to just open up spontaneously. And so after, months and months and years of practice. So I came up with those types of methodologies.
Yeah, I love that. So this is a special time, I think, for humanity as a whole. And it sounds like we're waking up to a lot of stuff. Like, what do you think the physical manifestations of like this stuff happening? Like, or what are we going to be seeing and witnessing and experiencing as we awaken and as these truths come out?
I think we are witnessing it. And for example, we were talking about all these truths. We can't go back. There's too much evidence. And what's going to be interesting is, for me anyway, to witness is how the old paradigm system, they're going to come up with some other story like, hey, we're getting hit with a pandemic again, or hey, but I think people aren't going to buy it this time. And that's going to be very interesting. I think they're going to try the same scenarios, but we are at a different place. So what you're asking me is, what are we going to be seeing? We're going to be seeing similar operations, DARPA operations or something like that, in different levels. For example, the California fires. Okay, well, that was weird. What is that about? And we can talk about that a little bit if you want. But I mean, like in different areas, whether it's healthcare or education or, or news or anything else, I think we're going to be hit with some scenarios. But the good news is we're not going to buy it. So that's what's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, they already are telling us, okay, on January 21st, we're going to announce a pandemic. Like, why? Why January 21st? You know what I mean? Like, exactly on that date, the governor and the mayor are going to be out of town. The reservoirs are going to be empty. All the insurance companies are going to, stop covering your house. I mean, it's like, what? Like, how is it like all planned?
Is that happening on January 21st?
That's what I saw
LA?
a few announcements. Yeah. So I think that's where we're going to be seeing more ridiculous scenarios that we're not going to buy into.
So is our life going to change? Like, are people's jobs going to be changing? Like, is everything changing? Or is it just kind of like we're witnessing these weird things happening?
I think this year is extremely chaotic, but transformative. Like I said, it's like you can't deny the truth anymore. Even people who are on the fence, people thinking it's like, no, this is it. These people aren't going to jail. And that's that. This is the list of things, of documentation and proof that this was happening. And that's that. You know what I mean? So I think it's very shocking this year. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, my whole reality is upside down. So they could hopefully take advantage of that and reconsider everything about their life, maybe where they live, maybe their job, maybe their relationships. So that's kind of what I hope people will be awakened enough, evolved enough to empower themselves, to look at everything and take back that control, and make decisions that are good for them rather than what they're being told. So yeah, I think this is what this year may look like. But then moving into 2026 and 2027, I think things will start to smooth out as we see new systems being implemented, new legislations. Hopefully we have a different system for healthcare, for the financial system. We'll see. But that's, I think, the direction we're taking. But 2025 is going to be rough.
How could someone prepare for what's coming?
I think, again, just bring back the power to yourself. Like watch everything that's happening, observe, don't buy into anything. Just observe what's happening and bring the power back to yourself and ask, is this my truth? Is this what is aligned for me, for my well-being? And don't be afraid to take action. Like even if you've had a job for 20 years, If now you see that this was a corrupt system or what have you, don't be afraid to take a risk, for example, or being in a relationship that, didn't work or what have you. So I think the best way to prepare is to do a lot of meditation, because meditation is going to bring you back into this alignment and into yourself, and find that energy within yourself to have the clarity on how to move forward.
You mentioned the fires in California.
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
That's my theory. I think there's a bigger picture going on here. I'm sure some parts of it were natural, some parts of it were arson, but a big part of it was direct energy weapon. That's my opinion. I'm not an expert in pyro, whatever, but just look at the stuff. I mean, it looks like total annihilation. Cars completely melted. Like a war zone. Other houses burned differently. Trees are still standing when everything else is destroyed. Specific items totally standing in the middle of devastation. It's very, very bizarre. And of course, I'm intuitive. I'm just going from that perspective as well. It just feels very, very fabricated. So but the question is why? And to that extent, exactly at the time where there is no water, really, there's no water. California is on the coastline.
There's unlimited water.
Unlimited amount of water. And so we are, the most powerful country in the world. Are we really? I mean, that we can't plan for a disaster like this in terms of preparedness, of really not having water when we live by the water. Just like things just don't make sense. So because of that, I think there's a bigger agenda. It's possible that they're trying to, I don't know, I don't want to talk politics so much here, but it becomes political. So I think it's just like deep displacing people, putting other people, things like that. But anyway, in my opinion as well, we're being promised like, hey, the permits will be easier to rebuild. How are you going to rebuild? First of all, the amount of waste and the toxic materials that are in the air right now and in the ground. What do you do with all this? In fact, we have a couple of friends who, the air quality seemed fine where they are. And then the next day they couldn't breathe. They had lead and graphite in their lungs. So the cleanup alone is, where do you put that stuff? So we're being promised already that, hey, we're going to rebuild and this and that. But I think it's a different type of agenda. There is no money. I think California is going to go bankrupt. And it's a bigger, much, much, much bigger problem. It's probably going to cost at least $500 billion, at least 5 to 7 years. How long does it take to build one mall? 5 years or something, right? So they're promising people, making all these promises that don't make any sense. So there's a much bigger agenda, I think.
Yeah, it feels like for the first time that I've seen, like people collectively are turning on Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking, this is interesting. I'm seeing like this energy shift against him, against these politicians.
Yeah.
But then I'm considering like, well, then who would be doing, like, where would that be coming from, right? And the only logical thought would be then like the other side, which would be the conservatives, like Republicans. And so then I was just like processing, I'm like, is there political people who would go to such lengths as this to try to take over a region? Like, I don't think, how I understand that those people to be, they would. But something's happening here and something suspicious.
I think it's way beyond Republicans and Democrats. Well, the Republicans are in power now, so I don't think they would go through such extremes just to, kick some government out of this. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's like way too extreme. I think this is much, much, much bigger. I think the destruction also happened in very specific areas that are perhaps some people are talking about underground tunnels and, and things being buried underneath and, hiding, documents and all these celebrity homes, again, attached to the whole
It was Mel
Hollywood.
Gibson. Like,
Yeah.
you see him?
Yeah.
His whole thing burnt down.
Yeah.
And like he seemed like oddly optimistic about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought I saw pictures of this guy like doing weird stuff just a few years ago, and now he's like this. Anyways, I think I understand what you're alluding to, and there's just so much more going on that's
Yeah,
bigger.
exactly. Yeah. That's why I think, unfortunately, through this tragedy, I mean, I have friends who lost their homes and they were very well off. And now, like they still have to, like they can't go back and just, the insurance is not giving them anything.
Wow.
And they can't just go back and build, not just because they were well off before, not to mention all the people who are not well off. So, I mean, this is a huge, huge tragedy that I think the repercussions are a lot worse than we think. And so people through that are going to wake up to a lot of truth and maybe some kind of revolution, of course, I mean, not like a French Revolution kind of thing, but more really like enough with the corrupt system, with things happening and feeding us lies, all of that. So the awakening is also happening, unfortunately, through these tragedies. I feel like we are becoming homeless in our own country. Like people are through this tragedy, like experiencing what it's like to be a refugee in your own country. We're being part of so many wars, seeing so many people living in tents, children without running water, without medical facilities, and we're just like, sitting in our very comfortable home. So I don't know if on some level it's part of the collective karma, you know what I mean? But again, at the end of the day, I still think of it as a positive outcome in the end for the sake of humanity's evolution and awakening.
We covered a lot, and I'm like,
I
we didn't
know.
cover almost anything on here, and this has been awesome. Thanks for taking me on this journey and sharing such fascinating stuff here today. How can people work with you, coach with you, join your ecosystem? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, I'm doing an amazing workshop. You should come. It's in Utah, so a couple of hours away. So all my work, even though I teach people to, different tools, we're going to do art therapy, word therapy, reprogramming and things like that to work on your current, whatever you're struggling with, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. But really, it's more to understand who you are. I like to answer the deeper questions. Like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? You know what I mean? Where am I going? Like, what's my higher purpose? Do I have a role in the bigger plan? So because that's who I am. So I always bring that sort of knowledge and awareness and experience through my work. And so that's why people who are interested to kind of go to the next level, I would love to talk about this workshop at the end of March, and you're invited.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll come. I will.
Yeah.
Where in Utah is it?
It's in southern Utah, in St. George, Utah. So 2 hours.
Even less, probably an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And then otherwise, on my website, I have a ton of work. CarolineCory.com. I've been doing this for 15 years, so I have so many online classes and sessions and free stuff on my YouTube channel. And my movies, omniamedia.com. I have all my movies, new one coming out, and the book on mental health. So it's a lot. So people can just sign up, on my social media or newsletter and follow and just see where, their heart leads them.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.